Hey guys, and welcome to Blind Crime. With cases like these, you'll never see it coming. Holy heck, it has been a minute. It was not my intent at all whatsoever for Ted Bundy to be the last case that I covered in 2024, but as I like to say, life was really lifing. And I got to a point where I could barely get out of bed, let alone take care of myself or the fur monsters or even remotely think about doing a podcast. So I do apologize for the lack of content since, November? But we are back. Things are looking pretty good, I think. And as of right now, we have a topic for episodes that are going to last until literally God knows when. So I hope that you guys are ready because we're going to be here for a minute. Truth be told, I really don't even know where to start with all of this. There is so much to it that it seems impossible to tackle. So there is probably going to be a lot of bouncing around. Now, bear with me because the bouncing around isn't for lack of research or lack of information. It is just because there is so much to this establishment that everything is so intricately intertwined and overlaps and ebbs and flows with one another that there's going to be a lot of different avenues that we go down, but it is all going to circle back to this one establishment. And like I said, this topic is going to be something that we are going to be on for a while because it isn't just the one single establishment. It is several establishments that are connected to this one establishment. But then after we get through going through this case, we are going to piggyback onto some of the other establishments that are also dealing with some of the same things. So please bear with me and put your seatbelts on because this is literally going to be the wildest ride that I personally have ever been on, and now you guys get to go along with me. In the northeast region of Alabama sits a quaint little town called Hamilton. With a population of just under 7,000 people, according to the 2023 census, it's the kind of town where you pretty much know everyone and everyone knows you. First incorporated in 1896, Hamilton has grown into the largest city in Marion County, Alabama. Surrounding towns in Marion County are Guin, Hackleburg, Brilliant, Bear Creek, and Twin. You may have heard some of these towns as they were in the direct path of the 2011 tornado super outbreak, which left the town of Hackleburg completely leveled by an EF5 tornado on April 27, 2011. To the north of Hamilton is Florence, Alabama, a much larger town with a population of around 43,000, according to the 2023 census. And about 45 minutes to the west is the city of Tupelo, Mississippi, with a population of around 38,000. I always thought that Tupelo was bigger than Florence, but by population standards, it's not. But Hamilton itself sits in a quiet little area of farms, family-owned businesses, and like most small southern towns, lots and lots of churches. One church in particular is what Hamilton is now known for, and its leadership is why we're here today. Located at 340 Bexar Avenue in the heart of Hamilton sits a building that was once a Big Star grocery store. Today, you'll find it painted gray with big carved-out letters above the double glass door spelling out Ramp. Started by Hamilton native Karen Wheaton Toe, the Ramp is a church, a ministry school, and a conference center with the ultimate goal to, quote, awaken, equip, and send, the youth of our generation. At face value, the ramp seems to be a wonderful place where teens and young adults can come and experience God on a whole new level, hence the name, the ramp. Ramps take you up to the next level, but so do stairs and elevators, but you get the idea, I guess. It doesn't make full sense to me, but whatever. But what if I were to tell you that the ramp and its founding members, leadership, and outside partners weren't totally being honest about their establishment? What if I were to tell you that the funds being brought in from tithes during church, tuition for the school, and offerings taken up during conferences weren't actually being used for what they told you they were being used for? What if I told you that what's worse than financial scams, students from the school have come forward with allegations that people in leadership, teachers at the school, have sexually abused multiple students? What if I were to tell you that the ministry team, the ramp is most known for, knowingly let convicted sexual predators be on the stage for the sake of, quote, redemption and forgiveness, who then went on to abuse more children? What if I told you that this ministry has ties to other ministries that have also been accused of sexual abuse and misconduct? I told you that this was going to be a wild ride. So are you ready? Because once we start, there is no telling when we're going to stop or how far we'll go. I've barely scratched the surface in all of this, and it is not just going to be a 1 or 2 part case. I have a feeling that we're going to be here for a while, so let's dig in. Karen Harris Wheaton Toe was born in Hamilton, Alabama in 1960. Growing up in a small southern town, she was raised in the Christian faith, and according to her website, she had her first, quote, real encounter with God at 8 years old, where she was filled with the Holy Spirit in a church service. After that, she began singing at church and developed a passion for Christian and gospel music. After high school, Karen moved from Hamilton to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where she would start singing and doing ministry with people like Jim Baker, Benny Hinn, and Jimmy Swaggart. Her singing would launch her into a career as a gospel-esque singer and bring the name Karen Wheaton, her married name, to many, many households across the U.S. and worldwide. After many years of marriage, Karen's husband, Dwayne Wheaton, would end up having an affair with who I believe was Karen's best friend at the time. After this affair, Karen would move with her 2 daughters back to Hamilton, where she would become a permanent resident once again. Karen felt like the move to Hamilton was what she was meant to do. She felt called to work with the youth and young adults in Hamilton. So when her and her daughters got settled in after the move, Karen began to collect the youth from town. She began with a small group of about 8 people, including her own 2 daughters, who would meet in the old movie theater in the shopping center on Bexar Avenue. She would hold prayer meetings and Bible studies, and this group of kids would pray and believe for the salvation and awakening of their small town, their state, their country, and the world. After a while, Karen would give this group of kids the name Chosen, as they were chosen above all else to be a part of this group. Chosen would end up becoming a dance/drama team and began to travel across the country doing skits and dramas and dances at other churches. Karen would sing and preach, and lives would be radically changed after these services. People would find themselves drawn to Hamilton, their desire to join Karen's mission of changing lives of young people around the world. As people would gravitate to the small town, Chosen began to grow, and the small group of 8 eventually outgrew the movie theater, and in the early 2000s, Karen would buy the big Old Star grocery store right across the street from their current meeting place. After buying the building, they would do a complete renovation, making the old grocery store into a building that would house what would become thousands of people over the years. I'm going to give you some visualization here, so use your imagination. The outside of the ramp is just a plain gray building with big windows on either side of the 2 sets of double glass doors. A wide but short staircase leads up to the doors with some shrubbery in front of the windows. Once you walk through the doors, you're greeted with tall ceilings and off-white walls with a chandelier in the middle of the foyer. Straight back is a semi-oval desk where students check in of a morning, conference goers pick up their wristbands, and greeters sit on Sunday mornings. On either side of the desk are two sets of double doors that lead into the worship center, which also doubles as a classroom for first-year students on weekdays. Towards the front of the foyer are two rooms, one to the left and one to the right. The room on the right is used as a bookstore during conferences, another classroom during the week, and I'm not sure what on Sundays. The other room is also used as a classroom during the week, but I'm also unsure of what it's used for otherwise. When you walk into the worship center, there's a large booth in the back of the room where they control the sound and lights and live stream for services. To the left, there's a smaller room where they store chairs and tables. The stage is front and center, taking up the majority of the back wall. To the left of the stage is a green room. On either side of the stage on the wall hang two large screens, like most churches have. To the right of the room is a large camera that does this sweep from way up high down to about shoulder level. During a conference, it gives a really cool look at the service. Outside of the worship center, to the left are the bathrooms, and that's a rough look at the building. It isn't fancy by any means, but it's nice. It's a very welcoming environment, and the natural light coming from the windows and doors makes it feel very cozy and warm. The worship center doesn't have any windows or anything, but it isn't cold and stiff inside. It feels like a place where things would happen. Good things, encounters with God kind of things. I'm unsure of when the conferences started, but with this new building in hand, they were able to make a place where people would come from all over to spend a weekend in Hamilton. Conferences would start on Friday nights and end on Sunday mornings for most people. Some people would leave Saturday night after the night service, but most would stay all weekend to soak up as much of it as possible. Hotels in the area all the way to Tupelo would book up months in advance, leaving those last-minute attendees with a long drive ahead and nowhere to stay. At the beginning of each conference, praying and shouting and speaking in tongues would take place on stage. Music would start, and one of the leaders would blow something called a shofar, which is a ram's horn, to kick off the weekend. The worship team would break out into very upbeat songs, and everyone in the building would jump and shout and run and just get hyped. Lights would flash and smoke machines would slowly leak fog into the crowd, giving it kind of an ethereal vibe. After what would feel like hours of worship, someone would come on stage and preach an impactful, powerful message, then more worship before closing out in an altar call for healing or for repentance or salvation or whatever. At different points during the services, in every service, an offering would always be taken up for something, whether that be for Camp Ramp, which we will get into later, or the shopping center across the street, or for whatever. Offerings were always taken up, and every offering came with a promise. If you give, God is going to give back to you. The Saturday morning services would start much the same with worship and offerings and a message. And they would usually start at around 10 or 11 a.m. and going until 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Then there would be a small break where people could go and grab something to eat and then come back at 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon for a chosen service, which is where the drama/dance team would do all of their dances and dramas and whatnot. After the chosen service, there would be another break in the evening for you to go get dinner or explore Hamilton or whatever. And then you would come back at 5 or 6 o'clock for the Saturday night service, which was more worship and offerings and preaching and even longer, more drawn out altar calls. There were some instances, and probably still are some instances, where these Saturday night services would last until at least midnight or later if the spirit was moving and people's lives were being changed. They didn't have a time frame on when and how God moved, so time really wasn't an issue. At first, these conferences would only happen a couple of times a year, but now if you go onto the Ramp's website, they have some type of conference scheduled for almost every single month of the year. April through December has some kind of event planned, with 2 summer ramps in June and July, a fall ramp in August, and the biggest event of the year, winter ramp, in December. Again, I don't know the dates, but at some point, Ramp Church was established, and Karen Wheaton's son-in-law, Casey Doss, was eventually given the title of senior pastor of Ramp Church. Casey Doss was one of the first kids to join Chosen, and he pretty much immediately fell in love with Karen's daughter, Lindsay. Now, Lindsay has a story of her own, and it isn't mine to tell, but just know that I will always and forever adore Lindsay, and my heart truly breaks for her, especially now. In 2010, the Ramp School of Ministry, RSM, now known as Ramp University or Ramp U, was launched, giving high school graduates and college-age students a place to go where they can grow closer in their walk with God and prepare them for a career in ministry. They first offered 4 quote-unquote majors: dance, worship, pastoral leadership, and evangelism. While worded differently through the years, and even now on their website, those are still the 4 main areas of ministry you can quote-unquote major in. That all sounds pretty great, right? A church and a school plus conferences. It seems like such a dream come true to anyone who is wanting to further their relationship with God and set themselves on the right path to a life in ministry. But like I said at the beginning, the secrets kept and the lies told are all too real, and there is nothing that can convince me that this place is truly a place of the Lord when so much truth about what has happened behind the scenes has come out. Now, let me say this. I cannot discount the real encounters people have had with God at the Ramp. Some people's lives were genuinely, truly changed and marked by the Lord while at a conference or at school or in a church service. I believe that even at a dark place, God can still show up to those who earnestly seek Him. But on the other side of the coin, I cannot and I will not discount the claims being made by former students, church members, conference attendees, and former employees just because some people had an encounter with God in this place. 2 people can have very different experiences at the same place and their lives be changed in very different ways. Just like some people love Taylor Swift and think she's a great person. Other people think she's a horrible example to young girls and refuse to listen to any of her music. Some people love going to Walmart just to walk around and don't mind the hustle and bustle of all the people. I, on the other hand, can't go into Walmart without having a panic attack because it causes so much anxiety. But if Taylor Swift raped you at a concert and your friend was able to just enjoy the show not knowing what had happened to you, you'd never go to another concert again and be traumatized by what happened to you, while your friend thinks that concerts are great and still really loves Taylor Swift. That might be a bad example, but I hope you get what I'm trying to say. And for the record, I don't think Taylor Swift ever raped anyone at a concert. That was just the analogy that popped in my head. Okay, so we've got the basics of the history of the Ramp covered. So now we're going to take a quick break, and then we will get back to our case. On November 5th, 1986, Scott Macklem was shot and killed in the parking lot of St. Clair County Community College in Port Huron, Michigan. His life was tragically taken by someone who had evil in their heart and murder on their mind. Despite the evidence, or should I say lack thereof, a man who could not have possibly committed the murder was charged with Scott's murder and sentenced to life in prison. That man's name is Temujin Kensu. previously known as Frederick Freeman. In the podcast Inconceivable, the story of Temujin Kensu, the host, Jason Usry, is doing the dirty work and digging deep into the case. Jason's desire through this podcast is to tell the story of Temujin, who has been in prison for nearly 40 years now, but also to remember Scott and help find his true killer. Temujin and Scott's stories have stuck with me since I first heard about them, and the fact that the justice system is so broken that an innocent man is serving a life sentence for a murder that he did not nor could he have committed is mind-boggling. Join Jason as he uncovers the truth, telling the story of two men, one whose life was taken far too soon, and the other who is fighting for his freedom. You can find Inconceivable, the story of Temujin Kensu, wherever you get your podcasts. It isn't beyond the scope of reality to hear that abuse is taking place in a ministry. Not to bash the Catholics, but I've heard nothing but stories about priests abusing altar boys in the Catholic Church. Pretty much all of my life. And as much as we may wish it was all just a bunch of made-up bullcrap, it isn't. Abuse happens everywhere, no matter the denomination or the building. If someone has evil in their hearts, it's going to happen. That would never happen in my church, you might say, but it could. I pray it doesn't, but it could. Something my church has started doing to ensure the safety and the integrity of its teams and leaders and churchgoers is to record every single practice for worship and everything, and to have cameras in every single room, except the bathrooms. There are no cameras in the bathrooms. But that way, if someone in leadership does do something, God forbid, or a churchgoer accuses one of the leaders of doing something, there is video evidence to show this is what did and didn't happen. This cannot be disputed. This is what it is. I think every church needs to do that. I think that needs to be mandatory. This day and age, whenever cameras are so accessible and you can record everything with just a click of a button, why are churches not taking more precautions to protect their members and their volunteer teams and the people who serve in their ministry? Why don't they do that? Why is that not a immediate duh? We're going to open a church. Let's put cameras everywhere except the bathrooms so that everyone stays safe. That's not to just protect the people who could potentially be abusing someone, but ultimately to protect the members of the church, to protect the people who are going to this place of worship so that they can have a better relationship with God. You do not walk into a church thinking that you are going to have an experience with God and pray and read your Bible and sing along to some songs and leave knowing that you have been violated and manipulated and used. And oh my goodness, this is hard, you guys. This is so hard. When I first heard about the allegations against the ramp and some of its leaders, I couldn't believe it. I cannot understand how someone could talk so horribly about a ministry. I thought that these people must have had their feelings hurt. They must have not gotten their way. They must have done something and gotten ripped off or let go or something to end. But after doing some digging and asking questions, I have found myself not only believing the stories being told, but aligning myself with the mission to speak out and give the victims of this abuse some kind of justice. I understand that in doing so, I am setting myself up for a lot of hate and a lot of risk, and I will probably find myself asking, was this even worth it? But I have to answer that with a resounding yes. I have a platform, and while it's small, it still reaches people. It gives a voice to those who can't speak for themselves. So many victims from the ramp have been forced into silence in one way or another, and it isn't right for them to have to stay in the shadows. If people can finally come out and speak out against Diddy, these men and women should be able to come out and speak against the people in the ministry that hurt them. With that being said, though, I am going to try to tread carefully. Unlike some podcasts, I don't have the following nor the financial support to take on any kind of lawsuits or anything of the sort. I also have friends and family that I want to make sure aren't in danger in any way. It is a risk to speak out, but I will not be silenced, and I won't stop until something changes. I might be careful, but I am not afraid. We're going to be talking about really and specifically 2 different types of abuse, alleged abuse. The first that we are going to discuss is the financial abuse that the ramp has put on its students, its conference members, its church members, all of those people, and all of the people that they reach to online and all that good stuff. So one of the biggest scams, that's the best way that I can put it, one of the biggest scams that we are going to talk about from the ramp is Camp Ramp, which I mentioned earlier on. So pretty much as soon as conferences really began to start, Karen Wheaton had said that God wanted her to start a camp, Camp Ramp. That's so catchy, isn't it? They began to fundraise and take up offerings and eventually acquired, I'm unsure if they bought or were given, X amount of acres of land to make this camp happen. There were going to be cabins, which would double as dorms during the school year for students. There was this place in a creek where a couple could have a wedding, 2 small streams connected together or something and turned into one big one, like two get married, they come together as one. And there was going to be this gazebo on a hill that was called Prayer Mountain, where students and church members could go and come to pray. And for years, every conference, every church service, every class, all you'd hear about is Camp Ramp. Nearly 15 years after the school started. Where is Camp Ramp? Your guess is as good as mine, because nobody knows where Camp Ramp is at, other than Karen Wheaton and the leadership of the ramp. Nobody knows. As it stands, Camp Ramp is just a bunch of land that is not being used for anything by anyone. Other pieces of property and land, like the shopping center where the old movie theater was across from the current ramp building, were fundraised for and had offerings taken up for. Students were encouraged to give all that they could to help grow the school. In 2015, they were fighting to buy the shopping center, and a year or so later, they did end up purchasing it, but like the land for Camp Ramp, it still to this day sits empty. Out of nowhere, a few years ago, an old call center building closed, and when it came up for sale, the ramp immediately jumped on it and bought it, but no one knew how or why. Church members were a bit taken aback at the church's elaborate purchase. Now, I am told that this building has been turned into a student center of some sort. The downtown area of Hamilton is pretty much all owned by the ramp and Karen Wheaton. They've bought almost every building, and while some of the businesses downtown have thrived, others have been pushed to their limits and closed with the pressure of selling to Karen Wheaton, or they've just been able to keep business afloat because of the new businesses being put in by church members. Most of the buildings downtown have 2 levels, so while businesses are being opened in the ground level, the top levels are being renovated and made into dorm buildings for students. The smaller businesses like coffee shops and antique shops have closed their doors after the ramp introduced new coffee shops and bakeries and restaurants in the lower levels of these buildings. Now, you would think that having all of these new things in the downtown would make the other places thrive, but there have been reports that a lot of these places, these other places, closed down because they felt so pressured to shut down their business or sell their business to the ramp so that the ramp could do something with it. And they weren't willing to do that. So they eventually either were forced out or gave way to the pressure and sold and left. So, with the literal millions of dollars raised to buy and build and renovate properties that are still sitting empty, where has the money gone? With the price of tuition to Ramp University, where does the money go? Is it being put where the people were told it was going? We know that some of it was spent on a building that they did end up using for a dorm room, but where is the rest? The only answer anyone can really come up with is in the pockets of Karen Wheaton and her now husband, Rick Toe. And again, this is alleged. I have heard rumors, and I can only say that they are rumors, I have no proof, that while they were fundraising for one of their many unused properties, they used the money from the ramp to renovate Karen's mother's house. I don't know how true this is, but I do think it's worth mentioning because I know for sure that in 2014, one of the houses students lived in was full of mold and had some kind of dead animal in the air vents, and the house wasn't supposed to be lived in that year for students, but the dorms that they were renovating weren't done yet, so they just threw 13 girls into a 2-bedroom house until they finished the dorms 3 to 4 months after school started. Now, I understand that delays happen in construction and renovation, but I also think that when you're housing people, you don't put them in a house that isn't suitable for living while they wait. But that's just me. I was one of the 13 girls that lived in that 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, just throwing that out there. When the dorms were finished, though, they were incredibly nice. 4 bedrooms with 4 girls in each room, a massive bathroom with multiple toilets and showers, all private, a big living area with a TV and giant couches and a small kitchenette area. Karen Wheaton had wanted to put a full kitchen in the dorm, but she said that in order to do so, they would have had to have bought a specific range hood for the stove, and they couldn't afford that. I ask, though, how could you not afford it? Just saying. At the same time they were renovating the female dorms, they had bought another building around the corner for the boys and began renovating it. They were also still raising money for Camp Ramp at this point. They also announced in 2014 that they were buying and renovating and sending some of their leaders to a new ramp location in Manchester, England. Karen and her family would fly over there every few months and give updates the following week on Mondays in class and eventually on Sundays during services. They even began holding prayer meetings from late at night until early morning, specifically for Ramp UK, as it would be called. Students and church members were encouraged to come at all hours of the night to pray and believe for Ramp UK, sacrificing sleep for the kingdom. Which, that in itself, I think is fine. If you want to pray and fast and, do all that stuff, that is between you and God. But expecting students to do it and it not affect their school work and grades and their work life, that might be a little excessive. Okay, we are going to switch gears a little here, and we are going to focus more on the school itself. The Ramp School of Ministry, or Ramp University, as it's now called. Rules, and more rules were given to each student during orientation. Some of those rules were understandable, like class attendance. Students are also required to attend and check in to every church service unless they notified a leader beforehand to let them know that they wouldn't be there. I think students could miss a number of Sundays and Wednesdays that weren't because of work before they got in trouble. But if you live somewhere within a driving distance to go home to for the weekend, like if you lived in a couple hours drive and you wanted to go home and spend the weekend with your parents, you couldn't just do that every single weekend because you would get in trouble for missing church. The dress codes were very strict. No leggings if you weren't wearing a shirt that covered up your butt. No athletic wear, no short shorts or dresses or skirts, but you had to dress nice for class and nice for church. One student, whenever I was there, came to church in a sleeveless shirt. It was a male, and he was taken into the green room and lectured for coming to church in such awful clothing. He was also talked about in front of the school and was used as an example of how not to dress. Girls were encouraged to do their hair and makeup and not to just throw their hair up in a bun and come to class. And they had to look really nice. You basically had to dress for class like you would for Sunday. In previous years, before I was there in 2014, the dress code was even more strict. The male students had to wear pretty much dress pants and button-up collared shirts, and the female students had to wear dresses, skirts, slacks, pantsuits, that kind of stuff. Another rule, and probably the biggest rule, was absolutely under no circumstances were you allowed to date during the first year. If you had a boyfriend or a girlfriend before you came to Hamilton, you were not allowed to keep dating them while you were at RSM. You could be engaged and you can be married, but if you were dating, you were just out of luck. Some couples who came to RSM together would actually get engaged or even married so that they could stay together while at school. Several students got engaged to their significant others before summer ended so they wouldn't be forced to break up. If you were caught having a secret relationship, you would be expelled. If you got caught flirting or fraternizing with the opposite sex during your first year, you would receive a fine. Yes, a monetary fine for flirting. Males and females were not allowed to hang out alone together. They could not ride in cars together. They could not be in each other's homes alone together. If you were alone with the opposite sex, you were in major trouble and you would probably get dismissed. During second year, you could date, but you still couldn't be alone together. You still had to go out in a group setting. Because of these rules, first years would walk out of their graduation ceremony single, and by the next morning, they would be dating. Some people even got engaged instead of just dating because the Lord spoke to them and said that they were the ones who were for each other. Yeah. Fun fact, God doesn't work that way. The only exception to this is if you were a mission student. At the end of the first year, you were able to go on a mission trip. And if you were going on that mission trip, then you still had to remain single until you got back from said mission trip. But as soon as boots were back on the ground, everybody was coupled up. Another rule, and one that I think bothers me the most, in the student handbook, it clearly states that if you are sick, and I quote, pray for healing and come to class. Like, what? I understand if you have something that isn't contagious, like maybe the allergies or something, but if you have a stomach bug or the flu or pink eye or strep throat and now COVID, how could you put other students at risk of getting sick? Now, I am a total germaphobe, okay? One of my biggest anxiety triggers is the idea of throwing up, and if that even is a remote possibility, I am hyper vigilant, and I will have panic attacks if I think that I am going to throw up. It is ridiculous. So to know that this place is like, hey, it doesn't matter if you're puking your guts up, just pray that God will heal you and come to class anyways and expose everybody else to all of your germs. And, for someone like me, who if I start throwing up and I can't stop, I have to go to the hospital because I'll get severely dehydrated and, that could kill me. So that's carelessness. That is not godliness. And I'm pretty sure the saying is cleanliness is next to godliness, not carelessness. So take that for what you will. Students and previous staff members have said that they quit taking their life-saving medications because they were either told they had to or because they were made to feel like if they took their medications, they didn't have enough faith. And we are going to get more, we're going to go deeper into this later on, but I just wanted to mention it now. So those are just some of the rules, but there are so many. And I think that now dating is allowed for first-year students, but I'm not certain. I also don't know what the sickness policy is now that we've been through COVID. I don't have a copy of the student handbook. I did not keep mine from 2014, so I don't know what those rules look like now, but it's definitely full of ridiculous rules like the sick rule. On top of a mountain of rules, each student is also assigned a small group. And these small groups are smaller groups of students who meet every week or so to hang out, talk, pray, read the Bible, all led by someone in the church. Girls and guys have their own separate groups, so there's no opposite sex mingling going on in the small groups. These groups, I think, are supposed to help support students and help them socialize with one another. But from my experience and what I've seen, it really felt like only the important students were noticed or listened to in the groups. The ramp also have people called student life pastors who are there for classes and monitoring and morning prayer and chapel services, and of course, all of the church services. They keep an eye on the students, and they're some of the people who will confront students about their outfits or behavior and will report to upper leadership whatever they see. And they're there to kind of support. They're supposed to be there to kind of support students and help them out if they need anything. In 2014, a lot of the student life pastors were also lead sozo conductors. What on earth is a sozo, you may ask? Well, it's a special kind of healing prayer that includes you, the lead conductor, and then someone who intercesses on your behalf. You come into a room, you begin to pray, and you were asked a multitude of questions about your life, your sexual history, what you like to watch and listen to, if you've been abused, if you've ever abused anyone, your biggest fears. Basically, you bare your soul to these people, and they pray you through healing those things. Sozos are a practice that I believe was introduced to the Christian church by Bethel, like Bethel Music, Bill Johnson Bethel, those people. The ramp actually sent out several people to Redding, California to do the sozo training at Bethel Church so they could use it on students at the ramp. Well, I do think that healing prayer sessions can be beneficial to some students at the ramp have felt like it is an invasion of privacy. And the fact that you have to do this, it is not an option. It is required. If you do not do a sozo, you will be confronted about it. Or at least that's how it was whenever I was there. That's pushing a boundary. And as more comes out about the ramp, former students have said things that would take place in a sozo session were brought up in front of the student body as a whole, or even in church services for everyone to hear. I don't care how you feel about sozos themselves. Exposing someone's past or fears or trauma is just wrong. I also want to say that just like you can't force someone to go to therapy and talk about their problems, you should not be able to force someone to do something like this. People are only going to heal whenever they are ready to begin the healing process. That's all there is to it. In therapy, someone can start therapy and it be years before they actually talk about what's going on and why they are there. Also in therapy, they have, this thing called HIPAA where you can't discuss the patient's sessions with anybody for any reason unless you state that you are going to hurt someone else or yourself. So, how in the world these people think the oh goodness. These people think that they can tell people how to take care of their mental health, how they can take care of their physical health, and then they want to force them into healing, which I believe that God can heal people. I absolutely do. I believe that God can heal the mind and the body and the spirit. But you cannot force someone to do those things. You cannot push them into a situation where they have no option but to do what you want them to do and expect positivity to come out of that. That is just going to traumatize people even more, and it is going to push them further away from what your goal is. Just like the saying, you cannot force someone to change. You cannot make somebody change if they are not willing to change. You cannot force someone to talk about their trauma and their fears in their lives. And honestly, it's not any of these people's business anyways. So what if you slept with 12 people? It doesn't matter. It absolutely does not matter. If that was your prerogative, that was your prerogative. If you want to have a different lifestyle, if you don't want to do that anymore, that's your business. You don't get up in front of your entire church and tell them that, yeah, I slept with so and 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 so, and like just expect them to, you know, you cannot do that. And that is essentially what's happening in these sozo sessions. People are being forced to put all of their dirty laundry out and letting everyone see it. And then they inspect the stains and inspect the spots and then ridicule you for those things that you've done whenever the session is over. How many students went through these sozos and were like, yeah, okay, like, no one's going to talk about this. It's going to be great. Like, I'll be able to heal. And they bear so much information. They bear all of their, like, their darkest secrets, their deepest, darkest secrets. And then whoever is leading the session leaves the room and it goes to Karen Wheaton and it's like, listen, this girl, she used to watch ghost hunting videos. She used to do this. She used to do that. She slept with so-and-so and she has a bad relationship with her dad and she does this and she does that and that she likes, falling in reverse. Oh, God forbid she likes falling in reverse. Oh no. Like the what good is going to come from that? Like, are sozos just a vetting, like a vetting session for who gets to be on Chosen? If somebody is on Chosen, or if somebody goes through a sozo and they have like nothing, no sort of history whatsoever, like is that whenever Karen Wheaton decides who gets to be on Chosen, or what? Well, obviously, we know that's not the case because whenever we get to that later, oh my God, I am angry. My whole approach was going to be calm, cool, and collected, but the more that I talk about this, the more frustrated and angry I am getting. Not on my behalf, maybe a little on my behalf, but on the behalf of other people who don't realize that this type of quote unquote ministry, if you want to call it, is wrong, and it's actually causing more harm than good. I have asked myself the question, I don't know how many times, what is the difference between like true Christianity and a cult? And the answer that I have found the most peace with is that true Christianity doesn't hurt people in the name of God. If a church or a ministry is causing harm to someone in the name of God, it is a cult. And nothing in me can say that the ramp is not a cult. Some people don't look at it that way. Some people see it more as an organized crime family, but this is just how I look at things. This is just my perspective. Other people, I respect that they don't see it that way, that they don't think that it's a cult, but personally, I believe that it is, just because of how they do things like this, how they force people into these situations and cause them to go through so much crap that they don't have to go through for the sake of healing, for the sake of, having a closer relationship with God. Listen, if there are things that you need to heal from, that you want to heal from, you and God can do that privately. If you need someone to help you navigate how to heal from those things, yeah, reach out to your pastor, reach out to someone, you know. You don't have to go through it alone if you don't want to, but nobody, and I mean nobody, should ever force you into a room where you have to tell them every little nitty gritty detail about yourself and the things you've experienced and the things that you've done, and have to live through that. And then later on find out or hear directly from leadership something about you in a sermon or in class or through a conversation sitting at the table next to you. You should not ever have to be in that kind of situation. Okay, I did not think that I had enough to say for one episode, but apparently I do, because this is been, right at 55 minutes. So we are going to cut it here. And whenever we come back next week, we are going to talk more about how the classes were set up and some of the stuff that they taught about in the ramp and how they did things with their teachings and whatnot. And we'll talk a lot more about the healing, the way that they talked about healing and why that is such a big deal. So thank you guys so much for listening. This has honestly been more of a rant than a podcast episode, but you know what? I was told while I was recording this that I will tell this story in my own way. And nobody else will be able to tell this story like me. And I won't be able to tell this story like anybody else. And I know that I have a small platform. I know that, maybe 25, 30 people will listen to this. Maybe. But people need to know about this. People need to know about this so that they are not fooled into thinking that this is a good place to go. So that parents aren't fooled into thinking that this is a good place to send their kids. So that churches will stop attending the conferences and being manipulated and scammed out of thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And as we dig more into the allegations and some of the proven things that have happened from some of these people in leadership, you will understand why there is so much passion behind why I am telling this. So you guys just bear with me. Like I said from the beginning, it is going to be a very long ride, but thank you guys so much for listening. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and go ahead and give me a 5-star review because that really helps me out. And I will be back next week with another episode. And maybe next week I will be a little more calm, cool, and collected, but we'll see. All right, that's all I've got for this week. So until next time, keep your eyes open.